Hi, welcome back to Toothpickings. I am Brian. I am a strange toothpicker, if you know what I mean. Today, I'm so glad you're here because today, William Crain is the guest on the Toothpickings web interview. Who's William Crain? Are you serious? Who's William Crain? Blacula came out 50 years ago, and it is the first black vampire in cinema. William Crain is the first black horror film director who brought us Blacula. Now, those might not seem like really big flexes because you can say, oh yeah, well, eventually there was going to be a black vampire on screen and eventually there was going to be a black horror film director. Sure, whatever. But Blacula did a lot of things first that vampire cinema had not seen, vampire stories had not seen before then. And I think we owe a lot of our current modern pop culture vampire to what William Crain did with Blacula 5 decades ago. In this interview, he's going to reveal some stuff that I had never heard before and I don't think had ever come to light before, as well as we're going to get heavy. William Crain's going to get real with us a few times. So enjoy this interview. It's one of my favorites. William Crain, I want to ask you, first of all, about, before we get into what Blacula was all about and the film itself, I want to ask you a little bit about kind of the background, how it came to be. At what point did you become part of the project? Were you there from the beginning, or did American International Pictures just kind of approach you and say, hey, we have a script, we have a cast, do something with this?
I think that's the way it happened. The script was already done. No one was in the cast yet, but American International had the script, Taurus, and I've forgotten the other woman's name, and they approached me. I had just come in from Canada. I was in about a year sketching around, and Hollywood's a small community, and I guess they decided whatever they decided. But I know I got this phone call, and they told me they had this script. Would I be interested?
And when you first saw that script, what was your reaction?
To be honest with you, I said, "What? A black vampire? How's that going to work?" And I read it, and it didn't take me long to call them. I mean, I was shopping for a job, and I thought, well, if you guys are going to spend the money and make this movie, then I'll make it. So it took me a couple of days to say, this is a serious deal, and I got a shot here. My first movie. So what are you going to do? Say no?
Right. You were young and hungry at the time, right?
Exactly.
Did you have a chance to have much influence over the script, or were you treated like a hired gun? Just say action and cut and get this thing made.
No, it was more than that. You already know this, but VIP was famous for doing repeats and just getting on the bandwagon. And of course, there was this what I'm going to call an ugly title of Blaxploitation going on. The title of the film at that point was Count Brown's in Town.
Okay.
And I know. And I just left doing Shakespeare, and it was doing Shakespeare in the Park and a whole bunch of things, and I just couldn't bring myself to doing Count Brown's in Town. So we sat down and said, can we write this so it makes some sense and so we don't look ridiculous? And they were amiable, and they said, sure, let's do it. So they opened the door for me.
So was the original Count Brown's in Town, was it a comedy? What was it?
They were trying to make it a comedy. I mean, I don't remember everything, but let me make a metaphor here. It was like this guy come out of Central Avenue and was shuffling around and shucking around, and was just it was almost a joke. Yeah, it wasn't that serious.
When you got a hold of it, you said, okay, we're going to make an actual horror movie. There's still a little bit of comedy in there, here and there, but the main subject is still horror, and Blacula himself is still a very serious character.
Well, absolutely, you're right on the target with that. Horror movies have to have some comedy relief. Mm-hmm. And so every now and then, at every other reel, I mean, I didn't count reels, but anytime that there was a chance to add some comedy to it, I thought it would work fine.
William Marshall really looms large in the Blacula mythos? What was it like working with him, and when did he come into the process?
We were trying to hire, Joe Narr was a producer, and we got an office off of Melrose, a production office off of Melrose. And we were looking for actors, and we had Scotty Mitchell was considered. There were several other actors, and I don't want to hurt anybody, but we had several actors that we were considering. And, you know, William Marshall was one of them, but when I thought about his presence, his voice, his elocution as an actor, I thought, you know, that's the way to do this thing, to make it a classic. And I got tied to that, and Joe Narr went for it.
He wasn't a really well-known name at the time, is that correct?
Correct. He was good in theater. He had a name in theater. He did stage plays from the West Coast to London, I guess. But no, he wasn't a well-known actor, and I don't think I don't know right off the top of my head. I can't tell you what his credits were before we hired him. I just, he came in the office and sat down, and we talked, and I picked up on his voice, of course, but I'd seen him in stage plays before, so I knew what he could do. I knew what I wanted, and if I could, you know what the problem was convincing him to do it.
Because he said he also didn't like the first draft of that script, right?
No, he didn't like it at all. I mean, it was ridiculous, and he wasn't going to be Count Brown Clown. That's all there was to it, and I was for him 100%.
When those of us who are really interested in how the movie got made, it's usually told through William Marshall's reminiscences, because he's done a lot of interviews, and there's been some writings he's done about Blacula. But you're going to have a different perspective because you were behind the camera. You saw stuff that was happening before William Marshall even came into the picture. So I wonder how much of his version of the story syncs up with your memories, or if you remember some things differently than he did, or if you can fill in any gaps about how the film came to be.
So 40 years ago.
I'll give you one example. The really famous example is that prologue scene at Castle Dracula. The way William Marshall has told the story, he didn't like the original script, and he wanted to add something at the beginning like that. He didn't say he wrote the scene, but he wanted something like that at the beginning that kind of placed Blacula in a larger cultural context. Is that your memory as well?
You know, I could, and may you rest in peace. We had meetings on top of meetings, and we were trying to redesign this whole thing so it would make sense. And so I think it was me that came up with the idea of what we should do. So I ran around and did location scouting, and I found this wonderful house up in the mountains here in LA. And I talked to Joe Narr about it, producer, and I said, why don't we have a beginning here with Vanetta McGee and him, and sit down with the real Dracula, and make a beginning of this whole thing, so he just doesn't. They play this rhythm and blues music, so he comes bounding down the street, and he's Blacula. You know what I'm saying? It had to be a beginning, and that beginning was recreated. And I don't remember. I don't want to shortchange William Marshall, but I think I did a lot of that.
Okay, that's a perspective that I have not heard. So that is good to have in this interview. That's new information for me.
Yeah, we hired. I mean, and then we hired an actor. An actor, Charles Macaulay.
Oh, right.
Was the Dracula. And I got to tell you, when we decided we were going to have a Dracula, then we had to hire actors to be Dracula. And what was that going to be? And this guy walked into the office, small little office I had. He walked into the office, and it was perfect. He came in, he had suit and tie on, the vest, and sat down and crossed his legs, and took a cigarette out of his out of his cigarette case and kind of tapped it on both ends. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it got really rolled up. Didn't roll up his sleeves. I'd like to say it like that, but I mean, he sat there very comfortable. We served him coffee. Took a sip of coffee, crossed his legs, and sat back and said, "What can I do for you?" Or something to that effect. I was wiped out.
I can picture it in my head.
It was a class act all the way down, and we walked out smiling. When he walked out, Joe Nara looked at me. I said, "What are we going to do? We got to hire this guy, right? So call his agent before he gets home."
I like it. Well, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but there's a significant part of the movie that has always fascinated me, and it's that the doppelganger love interest of Luva and Tina. And I'm getting ahead of myself here, but if you added that initial scene with Dracula and Luva and Mama Walde all together, that must have already right there set the stage for Mama Walde waking up hundreds of years later and seeing Tina on the street. So I wonder where that idea came from, to have this long-lost love interest reappear with the same actress hundreds of years later.
We had to have, he had to have a driving force. And why did he, once he was earthbound, and he sees Luva walking down, or Tina walking down the street, and it was perfect. It gave him that driving force, and if he could get her, then he was back, and it just worked. Intellectually, I just think that was a driving force for him, rather than just stomping around town killing people.
Right. And as far as I can tell, it's the first time that happened in a vampire movie, and it's since happened over and over and over again. It's almost become Dracula canon that Dracula goes in search of some woman who looks just like the woman he fell in love with hundreds of years ago. But I think Blacula did it first in a vampire movie.
What is the word for that? Bibliography? No, there's a word for that. A duplicate word for that, I think.
I've always called it the doppelganger love interest, but it's probably
that's it.
I'm sure there's a better college word for it than what I have, but that's the best I've got.
Sure, good.
You were the first horror movie director who was also black. Do you think you approached this movie differently than a white director would have?
Well, yes, I think so. I just think it's the difference between female and male, I guess. Now we call all actors instead of actresses. This is a weird thing that happened, but when they did, you get to screen Blacula screen, but to answer your question, you look at Blacula and then look at Scream Blacula Scream, and you have a difference. You can see the difference. It's in the making of those two movies. Now the director was somebody called Jean Valjean. You have to help me with these names.
Kellyan or Keljan, I'm not sure how you say that last name.
John Keljan. And we had a hangout here in LA called I forgot what it is. It was a drinking hangout here. It was a pub, and LA had a pub just like a Toronto or something, and everybody jumped at this place. It had background in New York, and so he had all these posters on the wall of actors and stage plays in New York. So it was, and they were, the guys were shipping free drinks. But Keljan came in a few times, and after the movie, and I'm going to pat myself on the back, he ran around and said he directed Blacula.
Really?
Yeah, it got a lot of notoriety. Now, I don't know what to say, but I never heard him say that. But the word came back. It was a small community, or a loaded bar. It was a small community. And I got tapped on the back a few times and said, because after the movie we did it, and I did a lot of TV, so we were still, this big Hollywood acting community was there. And I heard a few times that he had said he directed Blacula. So back to your question, there's a difference in, look at the difference. I mean, you tell me once we hang up, you look at the two and tell me the difference. I think that's why you're asking the question, and it's right there. Now, is it up to me to say that? I don't know. I put my version on it, and he put his version on it. And if you had the same production house, the same, more money, you had the same actor, William Marshall, and you had new people there. So a brand new one right off the start. You could continue the other one because he researched, he came up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could continue his flight for whatever it was. So you had two different directors, but I'm sorry to say, I guess, is there that racial difference? I'm sorry, you brought it up, and I think you're right.
Well, there is a difference between the two movies, and sometimes it's hard to see the first time through because William Marshall is so magnetic in both of them that speaking of just the second movie, I'll get captivated by his performance, but then sometimes after the movie's over, I'll think, that didn't make much sense. Why did that happen?
Right.
That didn't track with his character at all.
Exactly. And what you'd asked me in the beginning with William Marshall, how was he to work with? I think that's one of your questions. You just asked me that,
Mm-hmm.
and he was great. He was professional. We'd have rehearsals. We'd talk over almost every line, and he was just giving. He gave everything that he could give, and we would talk about it. And he'd ask, "Do you mind if I do this? Do you mind if I do that?" And I'd say, "Let's try for it. I'm in your corner 100%. Do whatever it is you think." And so a couple of times I'd do several takes, not just out of nowhere, but he might have nuances something new, some other nuance, some shift, some body shift or something. And as long as he wanted to do it, I said, "I'm there, you try it." So we'd have maybe 3 takes. I'd print all 3 of them, or 4 takes. I'd print them and look at them and see which one was the best. But he didn't resent the fact that we would do another take because he was trying his best to make it work.
Was he one of those actors of that classic tradition that would really make his voice do different things where he'd be like, "But if I held this note a little longer or went a little higher with this"? Was he one of those guys?
Not exactly, but he was an actor. I mean, he had the stuff to give, and he'd go up and down. But he was, once we shot it, and I'd print that take or go talk to him, even behind camera. We'd go talk to him and say, "Look, what do you think?" And we go at it again. So no, it's hard to say I worked with another actor that was that giving on the set.
And that kind of tracks with the stories you hear about him, that he's just a consummate gentleman, consummate professional. And I mean, what a voice on that guy.
A consummate professional, absolutely.
We talked about the term Blaxploitation earlier, and at the time when you were making your films, it was kind of a controversial term, right? Like some people, I understand that term originally came as a criticism. Someone used the term Blaxploitation because they didn't like that style of movie making. What's your read on it? Did you think that there was something more positive in those films, or did you feel like we're making B movies with black casts and that's what we're doing here?
I agree with you that Blaxploitation, I mean, if you take the word apart, something that's exploited has got to be a negative to it. Exploitation just takes it, it's the same thing. I didn't like the term, but there was the movie. Finished the movie, there it was. Blaxploitation, I was a little embarrassed about it. I mean, a little, there's several. I mean, if we go back to the 40s and you had Mantan Marlin, you had some other actors that would shuffle and jive and shuffle and, he and, those are comic characters out to get a laugh, but to a sophisticated group of African Americans, some of that was embarrassing, and it wasn't that funny. But that was the comic that you put in. The guy had to shuffle. He had to come in shuffling with gold teeth, And I kind of resented it. I mean, my mom was alive at the time, and she wouldn't look at it. I mean, she was educated, really. She graduated SC, and we talked about it from time to time. But it was blaxploitation. So no, I didn't like the term. They stuck the term to Blacula because of these other films that were out that were exploitive. And anything that they could find that they could give a black man a gun, a knife, or something, or slip and slide, somebody said, let's put it on film and sell it. And some of them made money, some of them didn't.
Where do you think Blacula fits into that genre or grouping of films, whether it deserves to be in it or not?
Personally, I wish they'd take it out.
Okay.
But I think, what has it been, 50, 40 years, 50 years? I mean, we're in Hollywood. I lie about my age, so I can't remember. but I wish they'd take it out of there. And I think as time has gone, the films that were referred to as blaxploitation, are they still showing in the movies? Are they showing in the theater? Are they showing on TV? Does TNT playing them? I think they're kind of gone, don't you?
Some of them, like Shaft and Superfly, became classics, and Blacula as well. But a lot of the other ones, no.
I don't think Gordon Parks, Gordon Parks signed me to get into the Directors Guild, by the way. That's one I'll never forget.
I didn't know that.
They had to go 3 signatures. Gordon Parks was one of my signatures. I don't think you could put his movie, Shaft, in that, although you had that great music soundtrack. What was the artist's name, the musician's name?
Was that Isaac Hayes?
Yes. Wait, what did you say?
Isaac Hayes?
Isaac Hayes, yeah. So Isaac Hayes was selling. So the object was I don't know what they had in mind, but he made a good movie. I mean, Shaft was good. I watched Shaft several times. I went to the studio and watched Shaft, and it was good and it worked. And here was a black detective that made it work. So I don't think that should fit in, and I don't think Blacula should fit into that.
Well, so I guess I'll have to take back something I've said off camera, because there's a book by Ed Guerrero called Framing Blackness, and it's all about blaxploitation films. And I was appalled that Blacula was not included. I thought, how dare he overlook Blacula? But hearing what you're saying, I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's correct that Blacula should not be included in this book about blaxploitation.
Isn't it funny how things happen and come together? I'm glad it wasn't. I don't think it should have been in there.
Well, we could do hours just talking about blaxploitation. Other people have written books about it, but Blacula is significant in the horror genre, specifically in the vampire genre as well. Everyone knows it's the first black vampire in cinema, not the first vampire in cinema, the first black vampire in cinema, but it did a lot of other things first as well. And I wonder, when you were making this film, were you looking at copying some vampire stuff and adding some new vampire stuff, or were you just like, I don't have any time, I've just got to make this thing go?
They gave me 28 days, so there wasn't a lot, but I wanted to add my version of a vampire. And since he was the first, I didn't want to copy anything else. I mean, I remember Boris Karloff, and I remember those films. I was raised on those films, Saturday matinee, driving that stagecoach through trying to beat the sun. But there were small little things, like take Blacula's cape, for instance. The wardrobe came with these capes with this red satin interior or lining, and I thought, no, I don't want that. I mean, we've seen that 1,000 times. Why don't we make it steel gray or slate gray? And I got some pushback on that from whoever the people were at AIP. And I had to kind of point to the desk and say, no, I want slate gray. I want silver. Silver, it's a whole new deal, a whole deal. This is not the old vampire. This is not the other vampire. This is our vampire. Cape is silver.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we did it. And there were small things like that to keep me going for another 2 hours. I'll find some other small ones. I'm sure we're going to hit on a few, but that was one high point.
I have a list I want to ask you about later, and maybe you can correct me if I thought it was the first, and you can say, "Oh no, I got that from an earlier movie," or maybe I'll be right and it really was the first.
Right.
But since Blacula was the first African vampire, there were a lot of films that came out afterwards that had either African vampires or Black American vampires. And I wonder what you thought of some of those films that came out later, like Ganja and Hess, what came out 1 year after Blacula, or many years later you get Blade, and you get The Sweet Blood of Jesus, and you get some other films like that. I wonder if you've seen them or what you thought of those.
I didn't go to see any of them, and now that you hit the point, I didn't see Scream Blacula Scream.
Really?
Blacula. Right. I never went to see it. So I think Eddie Murphy did one.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Something, and then
Vampire in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah, it was something else. I didn't go see them. I mean, I did mine. They had to reach mine. They had to get to Blacula first. They had to outdo Blacula, and I didn't think they were going to do it. And I didn't think one was there. And there it was.
I think Eddie Murphy references your film in Vampire in Brooklyn.
Hey, easy, bro. Hey, now, come on. You ain't got to pull that Blacula shit with me, all right? If you're hungry, I'll run you down to KFC down the street and hit you off with a 2-piece.
I was told that Eddie Murphy had a couple of scenes from Blacula on the TV in the background. So well, I don't know. I didn't see it.
He did try to blend in comedy and horror, just like Blacula did. I think there's a lot more comedy in Vampire in Brooklyn than in Blacula. But there was some scenes. I mean, the vampire was treated very seriously, just like Blacula. But then there was these comic characters that would show up, and you know, it was Eddie Murphy dressing up as someone else and doing his thing.
Well, I think listen, Eddie Murphy's an institution. I mean, to have his film credits. I mean.
There's this shot with Teddy Lester. It's the only slow-mo in the entire movie. And it's iconic. People who've never seen Blacula know the shot that I'm talking about, and you know the shot that I'm talking about too. How did that come to be?
Well, how much time do we have?
All the time you want. I've got 2 hours of film.
Before your guests come?
Right. Yeah, they land in about 2 hours too.
You know, in the script called for Elijah Cook, who was the mortician. He had a desk, and across from his desk was the morgue or the freezer or whatever. And once Dr. Van Helsing, Thomas Rasula, found the guys in the grave and found the vampires, he calls Elijah Cook and says, that cab driver that's in the freezer, take her out of the freezer and then lock the door. I think that was how it went. So the script called for the Kitty Lester to be frozen in a gurney about a foot or 2 feet just next to Elijah's desk. So to film-wise, to show her thawing out, we had to dab her with silicone or something to make it look like she was beginning to thaw out, which is a whole other story. Where she was angry about that. But we did, and she finally gets thawed out. And while Elijah is on the phone or doing whatever he's doing, she rises up behind him and she leaps over to his death and she kills him. And I thought it needs more breadth than that. So we filmed this in an old police station. I guess it doesn't matter, but there were a lot of empty corridors around. But I found a reception desk that was at least 80 feet, 100 feet, maybe even more from the door that I was going to use as the morgue. So, in that day, they didn't have cell phones, that, right? So I had to take this not a desk phone, but hang it on the wall and attach it to the wall. So Elijah Cook could be away from the office door and talk on the phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
While she came out of the office, which was 100 feet away, and would run down after him. So how to make that dramatic other than hire a camera that was a slow motion camera or a high speed camera? I got to tell you, pal, I tried to call AIP and said, listen, I need a high speed camera. And called me back a day later and said, no, we don't have it in the budget. 3 days before the shot, I called him again and said, look, this is going to be perfect. I got the phone that's away. She's going to run down 200 yards, but I want to do this in slow motion. Sorry, Crain, we don't have the budget. That went on for days. And finally, on the day of the shoot, we were upstairs in this corridor, and I had the cameraman and the camera operator. We had some old burnt film that was up, and I was running the film through this camera to try to get to 120 frames a second. Not visually, but to see that it wouldn't tear up the camera or tear up the film. And it was questionable. We tore up some film. Opened the door, opened the doctor, looked at it, and the film was all shredded to pieces. And he says, I don't think we can do this. I mean, we're really in a dilemma. I mean, you got to believe this. It's a true story. While we're sitting there with the arms going, how are we going to do this? Production assistant comes bounding up the stairs and said, Mr. Crain. Yeah, he says, there's a new camera crew that just showed up. You just pulled in the drive downstairs, they're parked. They want to know where you are, where to put this camera. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, wait a minute, I'll bring him up. Brought the cameraman up, a new cameraman, new camera operator. Said, what's going on here? And I said, what do you have with you? He said, we've got a high-speed camera. What do you want to do? He said, I need it right here, and I need her to come out of a door that's 200 yards away. That's what I need to film. He looked at me and said, piece of cake.
Wow.
We took the Mitchell and shot to put the other camera to the side. He set this thing up on sticks, and we rehearsed it a few times. Kitty walked it a few times, and I think we even backed it off a little bit so we could get more yardage on the run. And by this time, Kitty wasn't angry at me anymore for dabbing her with this stuff, right? She knew what she had to do. She was right on it. And I tell you, she was right on it. So what we did was when I call action, you've seen the shot. I mean, that was it.
It's an iconic shot, and everyone's seen it.
Yeah, and Elijah Cook sat there and talking on the phone, and his thing's coming behind him at full blast. And I mean, that must have just had them curling in their seats. And after that shot, when they saw, I didn't get a chance to see dailies because I was on location every day. We shot this on practical location, so it wasn't like leaving the soundstage going to see dailies. But I heard, I'm always hearing stuff, but I heard that they went gangbusters in the screening room after they saw this. And so I began to ask a little stuff, and I was able to get a lot of stuff. I don't know if a lot of stuff, but it kind of says, give this guy what he wants. Look what you got going here.
Well, that's great.
That was the story of Kitty Lester, and I won't forget it. And I haven't seen Kitty Lester since then.
Really?
I never had a chance to kind of apologize to her because she was dressed in a gurney, not a gurney. I'm sorry, she was just in a gown. So she had a little bosom showing.
Mm-hmm.
I had the makeup artist, with the sponge, dabbing her with silicone. And oh, brother, She was embarrassed. She was angry. It was, you know, I mean, I didn't tell her I was going to do that. I didn't warn her. It didn't make it. And I was watching her, and she was livid. I mean, absolutely livid. You know, I mean, it was an invasion, and rightfully so. And we got this shot, and we said goodbye, and I never got a chance to say goodbye to her.
She had a successful singing career. Was she already pretty well known when Blacula came out?
Oh yeah, she was. I mean, it worked. Yeah, she was known. Her favorite song of hers, somebody asked me that, was Love Song. And there's another one real popular, but Love Song was it. But yeah, she had a blooming career. I mean, and going through that era wasn't easy.
Do you think, this is a question for you and for her and for William Marshall as well. Do you think that making Blacula helped all of your careers, or was there a price to pay for a film like this?
No, absolutely, because it helped the careers, because AIP, here again, all my stuff comes from other sources, outside sources, but AIP was operating in the red. I never saw those books, but they were operating in red. And the reason they made Scream Blacula Scream is because Blacula made a fortune. And pulled them out of the red. It made more money than they made on any of the Blaxploitation films they were making. And it pulled them out. And so what did they do? So, let's do this again.
I wanted to ask you about the very end of Blacula. A little bit of a spoiler, but at the very end of Blacula, he walks out into the sun to end his own life. Whose idea was that? Where did that come from? Right there?
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to... Once they kill Tina, once she's dead, I mean, that was his whole existence for being there. His Ultima Thule. And once you do that, then he's got no business roaming around. So now what is he nails these people down in the Hyperion. You don't know it was a Hyperion, but that's another story. But he's not going to take a wooden stake and run it through his chest, right? He's not going to jump in the... You know, there was only one way to do it, and commit suicide, was to go for the sun.
Was that controversial?
I say again?
Was that controversial?
Yes. So, you know, again, like with the Kitty Lester outfit, you know, I mean, I don't remember what they had. I don't remember what the script called for. Whatever it was, I decided I wasn't going to do that. And forgive me if I'm wrong. Somebody will get me on this one, but I don't think he just opened the door and walked out in the sun. Well, we were down in the bowels of this place. William Marshall could come up the stairs and open this door to get out. And I thought, you know, he's not going to open the door and just walk out in the sun. Let's make him struggle to get it. And that's where the whole stairway came in. It was a Kitty Lester thing all over again. Okay. He has to start up the stairs. He makes up his mind to start up the stairs, and we open the door above him. He's got 2 flights to come up. And we open the outside door because there's a stairway that goes up to that as well. But as you watch him come up the stairs, Brian, you can see this torment on his face. You can see him doing this acting coming up.
Yeah, and he's struggling. He's walking into fire at this point. That it can't...
Walking into the fire, yeah. Exactly. And he's struggling up. And we had a full sun up. And the cameraman looking through this looked at me and he's looking through the lens, right? And was Marshall's coming up. I'm standing right beside the cameraman. Cameraman took his, had it fixed and had his hand on it, but he shifted his eye and looked at me and went, that was his reaction. and he's looking at it through the tube.
Right.
And when it came up and finally comes up to the prison, we cut it, and he just went, what do you say? And William Marshall, that was just incredible. I've never seen anything like. Have you seen anything like that? Have you seen anything?
I think he's one of the most underrated actors, certainly to ever don a cape like that.
Yeah, I mean, each struggle at a time, each step, each banister hold, each banister up, each one to come up, just remember. And before he does that, he is angry at the guys downstairs, and instead of him just killing them, I said, William, you're gonna get these guys and you're gonna destroy them. And a couple of the cops that are there, he grabs one cop, and I grabbed the cop to show him, just to demonstrate it. Stuntman was there, and I shifted it from one side to the next side and shifted him, and he's beating him to death until he throws him down. I mean, that's all prelude to him turning around, going up the stairs. You guys can't do anything. I'm in control of this.
Right.
I'll beat these cops, 2, 3 of them, threw them over the balconies and threw them and stuff. And now he's got nobody else, at everybody who's down there looking at him. And he's saying, I mean, he didn't say this, but it is, what's next? And nobody's next, so he knows what he's going to do. He turns around, and you guys can't get to me. I'm going to do this. It's on me. And that's when he comes up those stairs. William Marshall did it all in coming up those stairs. That's the end of the movie. That's it.
In a way, like it's a defeat for him. He's feeling defeated because Tina's been ripped away from him. But he's also, in a weird way, it's also a victory because he's doing the one thing all the cops and Thalamus and no one else can do. No one else can do that. So he's like, I'll be the one to do it. I'll succeed where you fail.
Exactly.
Wow, what a statement.
It's true.
I don't know if you had done the second movie, I don't know how you could have topped that. I mean, if he's brought back to life, what is he gonna? He's not gonna walk into the sun again. You've already done that trick.
You know, I'm gonna go off on a limb here. Should I have done that? I don't know. Should I have done that movie? I mean, walked away from it. Should I have done it? I don't know. You know, my little theater group here, we did a James Baldwin play called Amen Corner. And during that time, we had a wonderful theater group. And a lot of people who did shows after that did a lot of shows after that. But Frank Silvera said to me, you know, do you want to play the leading role in this actor on Broadway? We're going to take it to Broadway. We've been doing this thing for 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was. And at that point, I made a decision, you know what, I want to learn how to do film. This is what we wanted to do. I'm going to go to Canada and do film, and I gave the role to somebody else. And today, I don't know, I question that decision because I stayed in Canada for 7 years. But I learned how to do the film. Now, when I came back and did Blacula, that same question about my career, when they were going to do Scream Blacula Scream, should I have done that movie? And I've got to live with that decision. I mean, maybe they didn't want me, but I got to live with that decision. I know that they did Alien twice. Give me the director's name. I'm slipping here.
Ridley Scott was the first Alien.
Ridley Scott. He went back and did Alien again. And I often want to call Ridley Scott and say, you know what, Ridley Scott? People keep telling me I've got to do Blacula again. And I want to talk to him, but I just never called him. Should I do it again? Did it work? Were you satisfied with it once you did it? I don't know.
Right.
So I haven't called Ridley Scott. And now I understand that there's something out about there's a reboot of Blacula.
I've read about a reboot as well, and I don't, you know, sometimes these things don't work out, but that's what's being talked about right now.
Well, but I haven't shot anything yet, right?
Did they call you at all when they were talking about doing a reboot?
Nobody's called me, and off the scene here, off the thing. I'm not going to call them. right? I mean, you know what? What am I going to do? Call them and say what? You
Well,
tell me what you would say.
Well, you came up with some of the most iconic moments in Blacula came out of your brain. So even if they've already committed to another director, maybe they need a good consultant to come in and help them figure out what they need for the next one.
Oh man, I don't know. I just I don't know. I mean, these are questions that will linger on forever. You know, doing this directing has been tough. You're going to get into some questions later on, but it hasn't been a smooth ride for me. I think I'm good at it. I think I learned it before a lot of people, brought a lot of people right behind me, which is another one of your questions, I guess. It came on. You know, I mean, did I fall behind? I mean, I've got this beard. People are going to say, wait, where have you been? You've been up in the mountains or somewhere? I mean, where did they find you? I don't know.
Well, let's get into that. We can come back to more Blacula stuff later, but let's talk about how it affected your career. Did you find that it was opening doors, or were doors closing because of Blacula?
I'm sorry, I got a little interruption here. Say again.
Did you find that doors were opening for you because of Blacula, or were doors closing because of it?
You know, I think doors closed because, well, I really hate this, but I think doors closed because I was Black, and the industry at that time just it was new, and we're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I mean, They just, you know, we've got our directors, we've got people who have done this thing, and we don't, you know, what do you know about film? What do you know about it? And, you know, I've got people who have looked at some film, looked at it and said, so wait a minute, you directed that? Mm-hmm. When you talk about Starsky and Hutch, and when you talk about Rookies. Mm-hmm. And some people said you can't, and I think a byline I've said a lot of times is that, you know, once you're directing and the audience sees the film, you don't know who directed that. Right. You have no idea. You don't know who was behind the camera. You don't know who the operator was, but you certainly don't know who directed it was. And unless you are, I don't know. I mean, I can't think of anybody, but so that's always the case, but I don't think the producers who, you know, were the line producer were ready to hire me. I knocked on a million doors. I knocked on a lot of doors. Mm-hmm. You can do. You know, Spelling and Lynn Goldberg and those guys, they would hire me left and right, you know, just because I could do it and they knew I could do it. I ran into some actors who, you know, who would question. I ran into that several times. Some actors who just would question, wait a minute, do you want to do this? But, you know, I've got a million books on theater and background and stuff. I mean, it wasn't just luck. But some people were defiant. So was I rejected for that? I don't know. I mean, nobody told me we're not going to hire you because you're Black. They're not going to say that, right? Right. But I finally had to stop, I guess. I have a 17-year-old son now. Mm-hmm. Did you know that?
I knew. Yes, I did know you had a son, and you off camera we talked about him a little bit. That you're trying to get him into a college somewhere right now.
Yeah, and so I'm 17 years. So I don't know. Maybe I'm free to go now. Maybe I'm free to do more stuff. Brian, I don't know. I mean, I'm evading your question because no one ever said to me, I can't. Oh, wait a minute. One guy did say that. But he didn't say because you're Black. But he said, I don't have, all my directing slots are not filled yet, but I can't hire you. That was at Universal. And what was the name of that? Was it Hill Street Blues? I have to be very careful here because I can't remember all this. But one guy just looked at me and said, I can't do this. I can't do it.
And he didn't say because you were Black, but that was kind of the unspoken thing.
Right there, right on the table. It was right on the table.
So most of a lot of your TV though, a lot of your TV has white casts. Designing Women, Starsky and Hutch. You had a Dukes of Hazzard in there somewhere, of all things.
Yeah.
So was there a tension that existed on those sets that didn't exist on when you were doing movies that had a black cast?
Yes. There were small things. I mean, little small things that happened. Going back to Blacula for a second, since you're asking me something specific, almost has to go and get Dr. Van Helsing. He has to go get this guy. So he pulls up in the car, knocks on the door, goes up a couple flights of stairs, knocks on the door, says, "Come on, I found some vampires in the graveyard." These are not the exact lines, but doctor comes out, and when I got ready to shoot this, I couldn't be. I had to be by the car that was by the driveway because the driveway was right below the stairways that went up to the house. You understand? And the camera was down below where the car was. So when we're shooting, we'd come out of his house, go down the stairs, get in the car, and they'd pull out. And I asked the sound man to give me a set of earmuffs so I could hear. And Brian, this is a sad story, but when I got action and got ready to go, the guy on the thing turned the sound blast full up, right in my ear.
Mm-hmm.
And that was intentional. That wasn't. He knows what's on that switch down there when he's looking at those dials. He knew what that was. But that was his.
Why though? But. What's the point of doing that to your director?
Well, I mean, it would seem to me that if I was a sound guy and gave a director some stuff, I'm going to turn it down low and then ask, look at him and say, "What do you want? You want volume up, volume low?" He had it up full blast, right? Now, was that a mistake or not? No one's going to tell me that ever. I mean, I took him off and just threw him down. And he didn't say what happened. He didn't say, "Are you going to use them or you want me to adjust it?" He never said a word. He just looked at me. Now, what's that all about? I wiped these things off and threw them down. And I looked at him across the few yards, and he was there at the thing, and he sat there looking. Now, what is that?
It sounds like a sound guy who's about to get fired. That's what it sounds like.
I don't think they were going to fire him, but I got stuff like this. So that was like the producer, and I've forgotten what else was. What else was we going to hire? Let me know the actor. I'm sad about this guy. Who was the actor that had this cop and he ran around and then got in trouble and ended up having to go to court for accused of killing his wife? What was this actor's name? What was the name of it?
It's on the tip of my tongue. There was a series about him, and he confessed on camera, basically. Oh, exactly. I can't get it out. It's not there.
Neither can I. Okay, but I went to see that producer once. It was getting toward the end of the series, and agent called me and asked me to go over, and I went over there, and there's a stack of scripture there. And I went over, and this may have been a mistake on my part, but I took a script to look at it because I've been waiting there for about 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. And the secretary came out and said, "Oh, no, you can't read that." And she put it back. She went back and told the producer, and they came out and said, we're not going to hire you, so forget it. It's off. When I walked out of the office, this actor came out, the same actor we're trying to think of. Mm-hmm. Came out of the office, so he had been meeting with him all the time. So the meeting obviously wasn't going well, but those are the kind of things that happened to me in terms of trying to direct. Just going in as a director. Hill Street Blues, I went to see Hill Street Blues. I loved that show. I waited to see a producer I was there 3 hours. They weren't shooting. Mm-hmm. He finally came out and said, "How is everything out there?" It was heartbreaking. So I had to stop. I had to give it up for him. Those are stories, and I don't even know if I want you to put these in. I guess I'm just being personal with you now that you have me talking about it. But those are ugly stories, I think.
Well, it's all, even though we came here originally to talk about Blacula, this is all part of that experience. I mean, the story of Blacula grew out of that experience that you were having in real life.
Right.
You know, that the things that were happening on screen in those movies, like in the movie Blacula, reflected the experience of people like you, the experiences you were having just trying to get a job.
It did.
A job you could do, a job you were trained to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you witnessed improvement in that over the years with the next generation of directors or actors coming up?
Yes, without a doubt. I think the producers, the production companies, the production houses have finally relented and said, you know, what comes out on the film has nothing to do with the person who's behind the camera. You know, it depends on what their talent is, depends on what they know. So absolutely, I've seen a difference, and I'm happy about it. Absolutely, and for women. Now, I think there are more women directors than there ever have been. I think it's coming around to it. I don't think anybody's going to not hire you because you're black. Can I go out and do Shakespeare? I could. I could do Shakespeare. I could do Shakespeare on stage, actually. Would I run into some trouble there? I don't know. I mean, everything we do doesn't have to be about black actors. I mean, and if you look at my TV career, then there were a couple of times there were no black actors there at all.
Right.
But it worked. So, yeah, I think it's changed, and that's all for the better. Okay, young guys, young women and men coming through school, getting a degree, and now the whole thing has changed. I guess you can shoot movies with an iPhone nowadays. And
people have.
I don't know if I can do that, Brian. I want to feel these wheels and this camera.
Right.
I don't know, man. Maybe you think it's gone by me? Give me a hand here.
I'm just old enough that I shot on 16 millimeter film right before no one was shooting on film anymore. And suddenly everything was digital after that. So I think I'm just old enough that I got to actually cut film and conform a negative and then never use that skill ever again in my life. But I'm glad I had it. I'm glad I got to experience that.
Man, I've got my 8 millimeter little project there. There's just little bitty stuff that you have to go. You know.
Oh, that's a really good way to go blind, is to try to look at that 8 millimeter film.
I know. I got to have the answers. You know what well, answer me this now, since you have to tell me some stuff. Are people shooting anything on 16 millimeter now? Can you go on and do a 16 millimeter film now, or is it just
yes, you can, but boy, you don't see it much anymore. I've still seen some things get shot on film. People are still using 35 millimeter film, but 16, I just don't see it very much. Maybe someone wants to do something kind of offbeat and experimental, but I see it less and less and less.
So I have to go on and learn the digital stuff, right?
Well, the principles are all the same, especially if you're the director. The technology has changed, but all the principles are still what they always were.
Brian, it took me 3 days to get this Zoom thing going.
Don't tell people that. I felt really self-conscious at one point because I realized I was telling you, okay, now set the camera like this and frame like that. And I'm like, wait, I'm talking to an accomplished director. I'm so used to interviewing academics who never look at themselves on camera. So I apologize if I was micromanaging a little bit there.
I still have two movies. Oh, I don't know.
Well, you're too modest to say this, so I'll say it for you. But people like Jordan Peele would not be able to make these amazing films they're making now if you had not laid down on the wire and broken through 50 years ago to make a film like Blacula and open everyone's eyes to the possibility of what could be.
Thank you. I hadn't thought about it at the time, but thank you.
Can I ask you a couple questions from people on the internet?
Yes.
Some people submitted a few questions, and some of these we've kind of gone over, but let's see what we come up with. Sean Rourke on Twitter wants to know, was there anything the producers wanted you to put into Blacula that you refused to do? And similarly, was there anything you really disagreed with, but you relented and you're like, well, I guess I've got to put this in the movie?
There was so much input from AIP. Usually they had a reputation for hiring the talent and letting the talent go with what they wanted to. But there were several times when I said, I'm not going to shoot that, or I don't want to shoot it that way. The only thing that helped was I know what happened because I've sat in dailies before when we used to sit in dailies. Well, I'm going to miss that part of the filmmaking, sitting in dailies. Is that as the dailies came in every day, they became more convinced that they made the right decision in making the film. That was the right decision in hiring me. I don't know, but they were seeing the money come. I guess they were counting the bucks as they watched this dailies. I understand they were saying that they're excited about, let's go see dailies. I mean, I always wanted to go see dailies. So I don't know if it was my film or not, but they were really rushing to see dailies. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. There were some times when I said no, I didn't want to do it. And there were some times, what did they want me to shoot? Oh, I tell you what, one I can remember that stuck out in the very end scene when Blacula's in the thing there, he's full of worms. The very ending scene. I didn't want to shoot that. So they shot it when I left.
Oh, really? You weren't part of that?
I didn't want to do it.
What was your objection?
It just, I couldn't see it. Visually, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what they had in mind. They wanted to crawl them around with worms, and we just come up the stairs and all of this classic stuff, and they were going to put worms in there. And I thought, my God, how are you going to do that? It was a decision, but you asked me, so I'm telling you, I didn't want to do that.
Was there anything that they forced you to put in there that you didn't want, but ended up being in the final film, and you just have to kind of grit your teeth and say, I guess it's going to be in?
No, I pretty much had control of it. I really, really had control of it.
That's good.
I can't say that. That was, if you asked me that shot, it just came to me, because I'm being honest with you, it came to me about those worms. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I shot everything I wanted to shoot.
All right.
The music, the whatever the group was called. The music.
Yeah, the Hughes Corporation, right?
Oh, man. I sat there, I was just, I had no idea they were going to come on with that. I had no idea what we're going to do for music. And, we shut everything down and sat them right there at the nightclub and put the lights on them. I sat in the director's chair and they did their thing, and I was just flabbergasted. Just like the cameraman looked at me. Wasn't that wonderful?
When I watched those scenes today with the Hughes Corporation, I'm like, are we in a different movie now? But that was kind of a hallmark of the time, right?
I know it. I know.
There were a lot of movies back then that would just kind of take these moments, and then a band would just do their thing, and kind of all the action would stop for a minute, and we'd watch the band, and then we'd come back to the story.
Right, exactly. That's what I was thinking. This does not fit in the movie, but how are we not going to use this? Look at this.
Oma on Amino asked this question. I want to read it so I get it right. Did Blacula and the other blaxploitation horror films come out as a result of the civil rights movement, or was it happenstance and they just followed so closely on the heels of each other?
I think that was just the time. I don't think the civil rights movement had anything to do with it. I don't think so. The civil rights movement was more concentrating on just people going into houses, people getting jobs, And the film industry wasn't involved in that. As a matter of fact, well, I don't want to say, I don't know that's true, but as a matter of fact, the civil rights movement had to do with what? Education. People wanted to go to school. People wanted to buy houses. People wanted to rent houses. I can remember being turned down to rent houses. I said, I can't rent to you. If I rent to you, all my neighbors are going to move. You know, to an apartment. I went to that several times. Same idea. But no, I think it was the fact that Blacula came out. AIP made money. Everybody knew it made money. The books were there, and they made another one. And then, and of course, with Shaft, and I think everybody just wait a minute. Let's people will go and see black movies.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And crossover, people will go and see it. Blacula was, I mean, it just wasn't a black audience. I mean, there were some movies that were made just for black people that people went to see and they wouldn't even take a look at. You know what I mean?
Did you know it was going to be a crossover movie? Did you know that you would have audiences, black and white, watching this movie?
I had no idea who was going to see it. I didn't know. I just knew I'd make a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a movie because I guess because it was good, but people went to see it and they loved it.
Oma also wanted to know if you were making this movie today, in 2021, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I wouldn't use a 16. I don't know. I wouldn't use a Mitchell camera. Darn it! I got to use something else. Would I have done something different? Probably so. I'm not sure what yet because I don't have the in front of me yet. But probably. Mm-hmm. And would I have done Blacula differently? That's a hard one to answer. It's hard to answer that. I'm thinking back over it and thinking about what the film brings today. Maybe some of the language, maybe the reference to gay people. I wouldn't do that again. But that's all I can think of right now.
It's a mixed wish, right? Because if you could go back and change something, well, what if that ruins some other magic that you got right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's true in life, right? I mean, what if you had gone on direct screen Blacula Scream? Maybe it would have been great. Maybe it would have been a terrible experience. You know,
right?
All those what ifs.
Right.
You kind of answered this, but I'll ask it on behalf of Simon Bacon from Twitter. Asks, were you consulted on the forthcoming Blacula comic book or the reboot?
Really, very well consulted on the comic book. Can I show it now or show it later?
Yeah, let's take a look.
Yeah, I was consulted on it, and there are several pages of an interview. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, that looks great.
Any closer? No?
Yeah, no, that looks great. I love the artwork.
Yeah. I don't know how you get this, but a fellow interviewed me on this footage, and it took us a long time to get this interview. Just like you and I working together.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Alexander did the interview with me, and this is at least there are 8 pages on Blacula with photographs.
Oh,
no, not photographs, photographs on Blacula.
Okay.
And I haven't been able to thank Chris enough because it really all comes back. It's there for sure.
When you showed me that picture, it reminded me of a question I forgot to ask earlier. When he's going full vampire, he's got all the hair and the eyebrows and everything are going crazy. What went into that decision to have him not look like Mama Walde would otherwise when he's fully in control of himself?
To make him a monster. William Marshall was a really handsome guy, and very elegant.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see him as Mama Walde, I mean, he's a prince at that point. And so if he turns into a blood-sucking vampire, we had to do something to change him, but still be what is the word? Like people, well, no, it was a word when somebody's a dual.
Oh, the doppelganger.
Yeah, doppelganger. I never think of that word. But we have to make him vicious looking.
Mm-hmm.
I guess. But you got to change his teeth. You got to change his eyes. Actually, at one point we had his eyes that were going to change, but it was too irritable, so we didn't do that. But we had some contact lenses that were going to change his eyes. And we actually had them made, but as we put them on William Marshall, he couldn't do it. It was too painful. So you have to do the hair, you have to do the teeth, you have to do the fangs, of course.
Sure.
You have to have the fangs. And then you can't have this neat hair, this executive hair. It's got to have a big mop and stuff. So that was what we had to do to make him appear more monster.
It was a little bit different approach from earlier vampires, because earlier vampires, their faces always looked the same, and it was what allowed them to get up close to whoever they wanted to bite. But when Blacula changes, everyone instantly knows, oh shit, I'm in trouble, I gotta get away. But by that time, it's too late.
Exactly. That's perfect. That's what we wanted. That's the action we want.
All right. Another question from the internet. This last one. You answered this a little bit before, but I'll ask it again. Zip Warlock on Patreon wants to know, when you were making the movie, were you familiar with the book The Black Vampire from 1819? And if not, have you happened to come across it since, and do you see any parallels there?
That's a wonderful piece, that Santo Domingo thing, 1819. And I have to look at that again. There may be another story in there, another black vampire story in there. Yes, to answer the question, I was familiar with it, with the book. Did Ridley Scott do? I mean, did he do? When he did the next one, did he do a version that was before the original that we saw?
Yes. Well, he didn't do the sequel to Alien. He came back and did some of the later installments. And yes, he did do a prequel to it. He did Prometheus.
Prequel, so it would have taken part before the movie the original movie that we saw.
Right.
You see my question here then. Can I take this 1819 vampire and do like a prequel?
I don't see why not. You would have to balance it out with that whole Dracula scene and the prologue to, but yes, I think you could get there with it. It's a fascinating tale.
That's right. He doesn't become a vampire until the Dracula curses him. Right. You're going to be Blacula. So then maybe we don't have to do Blacula. Maybe it shouldn't be Blacula. Maybe it should be called something else. If we don't, the only thing that stops it is if we call him Blacula. And you're right. I'd have to balance it out with that. But there's a vampire in that 1819 thing.
Oh yeah. It's a really interesting story. I've spent the past couple of years reading it and rereading it and talking and asking questions about it. And it's mysterious because there's things that you're going, well, what are they trying to say here? But then there's other times where you're like, well, this is great. This is good horror here. Even for 1819, some of the horror is really on the point. So I don't see why someone doesn't try to make it. They would have to update some stuff. But I don't see why someone doesn't try to make this into a movie. And maybe you're the person. Maybe that's the next William Crain movie.
There's my trifecta right there.
Right. Well, you know what that leads into, because since Black Vampire takes place in Haiti, what else do you know about that might be happening in Haiti right now in the William Crain universe?
Well, are you asking me what I've got going?
Right. That's a roundabout way of saying what else are you working on these days?
Haiti's, the poor people in Haiti, man, they can't, they have a flood.
Assassinations.
Virus. Earthquake. boy, I have another monster, Brian. I've got a monster. You're talking about resurgence of monsters. I got another monster. And I'm full of anxiety right now because the ink on the script is damp.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have a production company, or I don't have a company that I've taken it to yet. I've got a good friend, an associate, Directors Guild associate, who was doing a budget, and he hasn't given me the budget yet, and so I'm sitting here I've been here for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month, maybe it's been 6 weeks. I mean, time is just, with the pandemic going on, I stayed at home, kind of boxed myself in, and maybe it's just as good because I'd be going to movies trying to see the latest stuff that's going on.
Right.
But I've got a monster that is that happens in Haiti. The premise is there's a voodoo priestess who does her thing on a campsite, and people come by, and some hoodlums go by and ransack her place, turn her card table over and throw her tarot cards away, and they cut off a couple of her fingers. And once it's all gone, she calls up the gods or calls up whoever, and she sends to the underground for somebody to send her up a paladin so she can even the score.
Mm-hmm.
And this paladin arrives and starts havoc. So this is a brand new paladin, and I've got to create this monster.
Right.
It's a new monster for you. But we're going to call him Damballa.
What? Say that name again?
Damballa. Damballh. Damballa.
Okay.
And it is based around, in a Haitian culture, there is a snake that's a good snake that does all sorts of honorable stuff. And, he holds, he's like a mecha or a god or something, a goddess. But this guy, this new monster, is not a good guy at all. So that's all I can tell you about him right now.
Because you have such a good track record with monsters, I'm looking forward to see where that develops.
Well, I have a couple of sketches I sent out for sketches, so people could give me renderings. Sent out for a budget, and we don't have an actor or actress yet, and I don't know who to go to yet. I'm just so terrified of this thing getting away from me.
Right.
I haven't been out in a long time. As I tell you, I've got a 17-year-old, so everything is all new. But my filmmaking talent, I think, is still here.
Yeah.
So once I get this budget, I think I have a budget on my hand that I can know someone to go to. I might even ask you, who do I go to with this? Here's the script, here's the budget, here's the actor.
If I knew this interview would be on, network TV right now.
Well, that's it. This has really been great. You got me to open up about a lot of stuff. I don't know. Woo, man, I'll tell you some stuff I've never told.
Well, I'm so honored that you would share that. And that, now it can be around for posterity and people can refer to it and hear your side of how this really remarkable film came to be. But I can't let you get away without quizzing you on a few of the things I think Blacula did first. And tell me if I'm right, or if you can say, oh, no, we saw someone else do that. So here's the things that I think Blacula did before any other vampire film. All right, so we got the first black vampire on screen.
Yes.
We got the first time a vampire is biting a man on screen.
Yes.
Previously, it was only women. We got the first openly gay people in a vampire film, and possibly, I think, the first interracial gay couple in any movie ever.
Yes.
First vampire suicide on screen. First time we have a doppelganger love interest in a vampire film where he's in love with a woman who looks just like his previous wife. first black vampire hunter.
Right.
First, I know you don't like the term blaxploitation, but the first blaxploitation horror film. Did I get it all? Is that enough, or is there more?
No, I think you got it all. I think you did. You did all of it. I love those two actors. I know those two actors who acted the gay couple, and it was right at the time. I mean, at the time it was perfect, and they bounced off of each other, and it was just perfect.
Yeah, like you said, we watch it today, and we might say I'd probably treat that a little differently today, but.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it would be, and some of the dialogue in there would be treated differently. And if I could take it out, I would. But I mean, there also is a mortician in there who uses a racial epithet, and I would take that out as well. But there it is. That was it at the time.
Right. Things change in the course of decades, and that's okay. We learn and we grow.
Yeah. We all grew for it.
What would you like the legacy of Blacula to be?
Oh, Brian. I mean, it's there. She's going to outlive you and me. I'm realizing that now.
Is that the dream, though, to like have your artwork outlast you?
Well, Gauguin, Rembrandt. What do you say? Gauguin, Rembrandt. The art is there. I don't know. I'd make another film and hope it lasts longer than me. That's just what it does. All the films that we think about are lasting, outliving the other guys, aren't they? I mean,
well, most. I mean, there's some films that are lost to us, but there's a lot of films that just kind of go by the wayside and we don't talk about anymore.
Yeah, they're lost in the can, right?
Right. Well, it has been a total honor talking to you, William Crain. Is there anything we did not speak about that you need the world to know?
As soon as you hang up, I'll think of a dozen things.
Sure.
No, I think we covered most of it. You got more out of me than I thought I would give up, and I think you got it. I stumbled on a few words, so make my English all right, so I don't look so bad.
Well, I tell you what, if a new Blacula does come out, let's do this again, and we'll do a little movie review of it and hear what you have to say about it.
Perfect. Okay.
All right.
We'll do it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thanks again to William Crain for joining me on the Toothpickings webcast. Thank you for being part of this endeavor and for sticking it out through these long interviews. Side thanks to Robin Means Coleman. I actually was trying to look for William Crain for a number of years, and I'd kind of given up. I couldn't find the guy. And Robin Means Coleman told me how to find him. So thank you to her if she's watching. She's probably not. She has better things to do. Anyway, look, I know I fanboy out on Blacula the way that other people fanboy on The Vampire Diaries. But I really think that this film is important to the genre. It changed vampires. Permanently, I'm going to say. Vampires are what we know them today because of Blacula. And so I think we owe a debt of gratitude. A debt of gratitude? I think we owe a debt of gratitude. A debt of gratitude would be funnier, though. Because I know how YouTube's algorithms kind of work, sort of. I know that right about now, there's probably a link to the side, one side or the other, that would show you, Scream Blacula Scream, which you can watch in its entirety on YouTube for free. Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, you can also see on YouTube in its entirety for free. But Blacula, well, that's a premium. You got to pay extra for the good stuff. So if you want to see Blacula, the original, which you should, pay the few bucks. It doesn't cost that much. It's important cinema. I'll also put a link below to the book William Crain talked about. And you know what? Watch the Toothpickings Twitter feed. When there's news about a reboot of Blacula or a Blacula comic book or anything like that, I will be jumping all over that. So keep in touch. If you need more of me prattling on about Blacula, there is a written blog on Medium where I go into way too much detail about this film. I'm just going to talk about this film until the end of time, apparently. But I can't, because that's the end of the Toothpicking season. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being a part of it. It means so much. I will see you again sometime in 2022 if we're not all dead from the Omega variant. Take care.